Hi, welcome to Podcasting for Teaching. My name is Rick Ryman. I've been a professor of history for 36 years. For most of that time, I taught students face-to-face, of course, but I was one of the first to develop online courses back in 2000 and have taught many students online in the years since. I've been podcasting since 2016, which is like 4 light years in technology time. My podcast is called audiblyspeaking.com. Unlike most podcasters, podcasting is not my full-time gig. Education is the name of my game, and since podcasting is a mystery for many, and its mechanics are a mystery to many, I thought that a tutorial on the what, the why, and the how of podcasting would be helpful to those who either teach or just want to enlighten a wide variety of listeners. This tutorial series will not be just a talking head, but a walkthrough of screenshots as I demonstrate the path to podcasting success. We will look at the sites, the software, and the hardware relevant to getting started. The pros or advantages of podcasting are many, including, first, it can cost you as a podcaster under $20 a month, and it costs your students and listeners nothing at all. Students are automatically delivered your podcasts, and you don't have to seek them out. You can make the whole world your classroom. Also, it's another way to extend your professional reach and to meet students where they are. Not every student likes to learn by reading. We all know that. Some prefer learning by listening, and it's fun and exciting, and you'll enjoy extending your skills. Finally, before we get started, I want to debunk a few myths about the subject. One is, probably the biggest, that you have to have a beautiful voice to podcast. Producers of audiobooks all agree that this is nonsense. One said, "How often do you meet somebody at a party, and as they're walking away, you say, 'Wow, he had an odd voice,' a disagreeable voice?" And that never happens, and we all know it. My voice, I always thought, was terrible, and that was an impediment to me trying out podcasting. But, you can always improve how you sound, and anyway, the most important thing these audiobook producers say is that you care about the subject you're talking about. If you give a darn about what you're saying and you can communicate that, then you'll be a great audio narrator. That's it. That should be easy for those of us who are teachers or would-be teachers of the subjects of our podcasts, which is anyone who has a podcast. Another myth is that you have to be rich or a computer geek to podcast. You'll see very soon in this video how inexpensive podcasting is and how easy it is to master. Now, a lot of people probably are afraid to podcast because they think it might be too expensive or they think it might be technically too difficult. But if I can do it, you can do it. And it's certainly not too expensive. It's totally free for the students. So why wouldn't anyone want to podcast to become a better teacher? That's the way I look at it. Now here you see a website that I have for one of my classes. You can see the homepage or a part of it. And you can see it's a very flat design. Students have to look at this and figure it out. They can read the syllabus, of course, but they don't really know how to use it right off the bat, and they may be confused, and they certainly will be bored. That you can rely on. So what podcasting does is it opens up a new kind of environment for students to be drawn into the course and to become interested in history. It changes up the method of teaching. It also appeals to learners who are more into listening rather than reading. And we have to meet our students where they are, and we have to provide materials for different types of learning styles. So that's one reason why podcasting might be interesting for teachers, and I think it is. Now let's talk about how to do it. And this also involves the costs of podcasting. And I call this part of the presentation, What Price Podcasting? What does it cost for hardware and software? Well, let's take a look at software first. What you see here is Blubrry, a podcasting hosting site. And this is probably the most important site that you're going to need for your podcasting, because this allows you to store your podcast recordings in a place where there's enough bandwidth to keep your podcast recordings going. Because you can't just take a recording and put it on your website, because your website has limited storage capacity. And if you exceed that storage capacity, your website will either crash or you will have to purchase a lot more storage capacity, and it's much cheaper to purchase it on a podcast hosting site. As you can see here, podcast hosting is dedicated. It's much cheaper and it's much faster. Now here you see you can explore your options here, and let's open that up. You can get your first month free, and this is what I recommend, this small version. It's only $12 a month, and it has 100 megabytes of monthly storage. Unlimited bandwidth. That means no matter how many people download your podcast or listen to it by streaming, you don't have to pay extra for it. It also has statistics that will show you who's listening to your podcast, where they're listening from, what kind of computer they're using. Now, some of that's not that interesting, but it is interesting to see where in the world your listeners are. And believe me, you will have listeners in every country of the world once you get your podcast going. So 100 megabytes of monthly storage, that's pretty good. That's approximately 5 20-minute recordings a month. That's because they do let you exceed the 100 megabytes by a little bit each month. I think it's 25 megabytes over that limit without charging you more. So that's pretty good. 5 20-minute recordings a month. And what happens is that as long as you keep subscribing, the recordings you made the previous months are still hosted. And so if you stop subscribing, you won't be able to stream your recordings in the past unless you get a new host. And so this is not very expensive. And it is an excellent platform, because they not only host your podcasts, but they also give you a website to present your podcasts on. And you need a website because you need to have a place to have your player displayed so that people can listen to your podcast. Now, they may subscribe to your podcast on a podcast aggregator like iTunes. They might do that, and many of them will. But you also want a website because you can explain what it is that you want your listeners to listen to. Otherwise, they don't have much to go on. And so Blubrry gives you a WordPress site. And what WordPress is an interface that allows people who don't know anything about coding to create websites that are quite impressive. Again, this is included with Blubrry for free. So you don't have to have these expensive plans. It says most popular. But that's if you're really wordy, if you really have a lot to say. I've never been able to exceed this. Some months I don't record that much. I don't want to spend money crazily. And so $12 a month is a pretty good deal. In this tutorial, we look lastly at the free website that comes along with Blubrry. This is the podcasting dashboard that you see once you are administering your site. You see it's tied to audiblyspeaking.com. And you can upload your recordings here, and it will always tell you how much space you have left in your monthly allotment. So that's nice. But here is a link to the website that I originally called History Revisited. This was the original name of my podcast. And so you can see that right here. Now let's click on that and let's visit the website. And here's the website that you see when you log on from your Blueberry site, or when you just simply put the URL into the site at the top. Audibly Speaking, a site of history and memory. This was, again, the original website that I had. I've got a new website that I pay more for because I want to have more control over the look of the website and the things you can do with it. And that's the website you saw at the beginning of this video. But this is a perfectly fine way to frame your podcast. And again, it is a WordPress site, and I'll show you the administrative end in a few minutes. What you see here are the posts that make up this blog. This is basically a blog website. And every time you make a recording, you have a player, as you can see here, and you have a title of the recording, which you can present here. And I've got links to Twitter and Facebook as well. And some of these blog posts, like this one, The Constitution in Context, has a description of what the podcast is all about. But each of the posts has the player for that particular post. And by clicking on the plus sign, you can actually play the recording. And so this is what Blueberry gives you. And when you set up a post, you simply designate that the player should play the recording that you have created for that particular post. But a website just presents the information about the post, and it presents the player that goes with the recording. So here's another one, analyzing Darcy Fry's last shot. This was for a particular course that I taught, and this recording is 4 minutes and 27 seconds. The students can adjust the volume, and they play it simply by clicking on the arrow. And there is no time lag between the time you press the button and the time the recording starts, because it streams. And Blueberry is such an excellent host that there is no delay whatsoever. But again, this podcast website does not have the podcast recordings stored in it. The podcast recordings are hosted by Blueberry, and this is a website that Blueberry gives you, but it's not connected to the Blueberry host. You just use this to display those podcast recordings. And you can go back to the archives, and you can go back to earlier podcast recordings. And so that's very nice. Now let's see the back end of this website. That is the administrative part of the website. So here's what you see as an administrator of the website. And it looks complicated, but it absolutely is not. Once again, here's a link to the posts. I was showing you the posts a moment ago. And you can click Add New, and you put the title of your post. You put the description of what that post is about. And down here, you can designate what recording you want to use for your player. And you can't see it, but there is a button right over here in which you can go to your podcast list in Blueberry and simply click on the recording you want to be displayed in that post, and it will directly play that recording and display it. And so this is a very quick overview of what you get with Blueberry. And we haven't even started talking about such things as how you make the recordings and how you convert them so that they are crystal clear in quality. But we'll talk about that in a future tutorial. Until then, thank you for joining me. I'm Rick Ryman, and I hope you will subscribe to this tutorial series. And I hope you'll enjoy it. And go to my website, audiblyspeaking.com, and let me know what you think about it. Thanks a lot.